What Doc had in '08 was special. And he was lucky as hell. Lucky as hell. The year before that, they was wearing trash bags.
He could have got fired. Nobody would have made a peep. Yeah.
Made a peep. But then the next year they win it. Now he's one of the bestest coach ever. I'm just not feeling that.
Is he overrated as a coach?
I think so.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
You are now one of the best players in the world. But at the time, I understand that you were, oh, I'm sorry, say it again. The best? Say it again.
Whatever you want.
No. I want to hear from you.
The best.
The best. Thank you. Okay, everybody hear that? The best player in the world.
When he was through LA, we were talking about matchup. A couple of weeks ago, he was asking, do you think Jokic is going to play when they go to Philly? Like, he's already been thinking about this for a long time. The Super Bowl for the NFL is in a couple weeks. For Joel, this Saturday.
Personal Super Bowl.
It's right up there.
The 2023 Philadelphia 76ers may possibly be the biggest frauds of my entire life. I thought about it deeply, thinking, well, it may possibly be last year's 64-win Suns. But the more I thought about it, they didn't have an MVP on their team at any point of their careers. The 76ers had two, and they had the MVP this year. Also, they damn sure didn't have a coach that's regarded as the top 10 coach of all time by the NBA. So with all those things being heavily considered, this most definitely is the team for me. I'm gonna start with the head of the snake, Joel Embiid. This man cried for that MVP essentially for 3 straight years. And this playoff run specifically, for me at least, it proved that last week, him hoisting that MVP and him having that moment with his son and all that, that was most definitely him winning his first NBA championship. I don't care what anybody says. This man really had the audacity as the MVP of the league to get up to the post-game podium and give his teammates backhand insults as if he played up to par as what he considers himself to be the best player in the world. Y'all remember he said that? Well, best players in the world, they most definitely don't perform like that in the most pivotal moments. And Joel Embiid has a long track record of doing this. All these who's the best player in the world debates that can literally swing any way depending on what time of the year it is, who underperformed, all it makes me do is appreciate the era in which we had the definitive best player in the world for at least 10 years, LeBron James. Not to compare these two, because honestly, it's offensive to LeBron to even make this comparison in the first place. But when LeBron was rightfully considered as the best player on the planet, it was because even in the games, the series, the finals he lost, he didn't leave room for you to question about who was the best player on the floor. No, you most definitely knew. For his career, a player that lived for moments where his back was essentially against the wall, look at what he did in elimination games. When you get to that point, that's when the whole world concedes, okay, that dude is the best player on the planet. Not because you had a few cool regular seasons for 65, 60 games each, and then you fizzle out in the playoffs every year. No, it don't work like that. Joel Embiid, after winning that MVP, he picked Game 7 to have his worst game of the playoffs. And guess what's the sad part? This isn't the first time he's done that. And a matter of fact, before I even get to that, I don't even think it was just the worst game he had of the playoffs. You could legitimately argue that was the worst game he had of the season. His season low in games in which he played the majority of the minutes, his season low was 15 points. Last night, he had 15 points. In that regular season game in which he scored 15 points, he went 6 for 21 and shot 29% from the field. Last night, he went 5 for 18 and shot 28. So yeah, I think he picked Game 7 to have his worst game of the season. This is why Joel Embiid, to me, is so fraudulent. And the regular season stuff going forward means absolutely nothing. In the regular season, this man scored 30 points or more 44 out of 65 times. He was so dominant in the regular season, in which I raved about it and praised him for it. He even had like a 10-11 game streak where he scored 30 points shooting 50% from the field, which at that time was historical. He was the first center to win back-to-back scoring titles. Going back to last year, he was the first center to average 30 in 40 years, and he came back this year and duplicated it. And in the playoffs, we seen none of it. This season, this man had 39 games in which he scored at least 30 points or more and shot 50% from the field. In the playoffs, you know how many times he did that? He never did it. He literally never did that. In these last two seasons, these last two regular seasons, he's first in points a night. When we translate into the playoffs, the exact same years, last year and this year, do you know where he ranks amongst players in points a night in the playoffs? He's 16th. this man just had a playoffs as an MVP in which he just had the biggest point per game drop off from regular season to the playoffs ever. And going back to this not even being his first time folding in the biggest moments, look at this man's career in elimination games. It's been pathetic, especially for a player of that caliber. I just told you, he picked last night, game 7 of an elimination game, to have the worst game of the entire playoffs. Last year against Miami, he picked game 6 of the elimination game to have the worst game of the playoffs. Last year, he missed the first 2 games against Miami in which they fell down 0-2. They won the next 2 games when he came back, and then in the next following 2 games, he never showed up. And it's like he always has that pre-ready-made excuse of, well, Joel Embiid is on one leg, his face is broken, his knee hurts, his finger hurts. I'm just over it, bruh. In the season before that, the 2021 season, where they were the first seed and Ben Simmons basically got scapegoated, rightfully so. But Joel Embiid wasn't perfect. In that game 4 against Atlanta, a team they really had no business being that competitive against, a chance to go up 3-1, he had like an all-time type of stinker. They lost that game, and then the following game, they blew a lead at home and fell down 2-3. And then in game 6, an elimination game, by the way, he came out and kind of had another stinker. So, like I said, Ben Simmons was the fault of everything, but Joel Embiid wasn't perfect. Going back 4 years ago against Toronto, they got up 2-1. And in the next 4 games, look at what this man did or didn't do. In that game 7 against Toronto, he and Kawhi both played the most minutes out of anybody on the floor. Kawhi had 41 points and hit the game winner. Joel Embiid had 21 points and went 6 for 18. So like I said, this man has a legit history of playoff chokes. He always just had a few scapegoats in front of him. Doc Rivers, Ben Simmons, James Harden last year, and it made us overlook the biggest one of them all right now. Joel Embiid, he's the best player. And then even defensively last night, he kind of checked out. In the first quarter, he was decent, but then after that, Jason Tatum had 18 points in the paint, and a lot of them was on Joel Embiid, so he looked lethargic there. And then the icing on this terrible cake, you come out in the post-game conference and you say it has to be more than just you and James Harden, as if y'all ball, when in fact, neither one of y'all showed up. That was insane to me. And you revert back to old troll Joel Embiid when nobody really took you serious, and you quote and play with Giannis as if Giannis doesn't have a championship already. And even in his bad collapse games where he just couldn't hit a free throw, he still scored 38 points and had 20 boards. You were terrible. So like I said, man, I lost a lot of respect for Joel Embiid. I'm gonna be honest with you. Also, James Harden. I'm not gonna hone in too much on how he choked, because at this point, it's literally beating a dead horse. When somebody shows you who they are, time after time after time, you have to believe him, or it's your fault now. James Harden, and I don't really think this is new because we already kind of knew this, but he officially stamped himself as a generational choker in this series specifically. And I believe this may have been his best chance to actually win an NBA championship outside of that 2018 run with Houston. He really had 3 great games and 2 what's to come games. The last 2 games, a great chance to make his first NBA finals in his prime, by the way. He was just ass. Like that's the best way to describe it. All he did specifically in this game 7 was drive, penetrate, kick, and get out the way when the play broke down. That's all he did. In the second half, mind you, the game was a 3-point game going into the halftime. He scored 3 points. That is James Harden at his finest. I'm done with him. I understand what he is. I would never try to get expectations for James Harden. I never really did. But we know by this point what James Harden is as a player. And lastly, Doc Rivers. I saved him for last because I don't want to be too hard on him per se, but for whatever reason, this man just can't get the best out of his best players. He just can't. All it really takes is one slight chess move by the opposing team's coach against whatever his bread and butter is, offensively or defensively. And his whole entire system routinely debacles. Once Joe Mazzulla went big and started Al Horford and Robert Williams to take away some of Joel Embiid's effectiveness and show him more bodies, that was pretty much it. He had no answer. Doc had no answers. Now, this man has lost 10 game 7s. That's 5 more than any other coach. We know he has 3 3-1 blown leads. No other coach has more than 1. And just look, I gave you guys a beautiful presentation of this man's playoff history blowing leads. Just look at all the leads he blew with so many different teams and all these great players. I mean, this man has coached Tracy McGrady, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Jamal Crawford, JJ Redick, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, Ben Simmons, what he used to be, Joel. It just doesn't stop. He is the common denominator, man. All those players I just named, he's found ways to blow significant, major leads with all of them. He has to go, man. He just has to. All in all, with all the blame to go around, I still put the majority of the heat on Joel Embiid because you got the MVP, because you cried for this MVP, because you called yourself the best player on the planet. All of this, and you laid another egg. I'm putting it on him. If you guys like this video, like I said, man, this is one of the biggest fraudulent teams I've ever seen. It's not just Joel Embiid. I mean, you could say Tobias Harris, you could say James Harden, Doc Rivers, but this man, it was so much hoopla about this award, and once he got it, I mean, he just didn't perform up to it, and that's very bothersome. Like I said, if you guys like this video, follow my social media sites, comment, do all that great stuff, guys, and until next time, as always, stay tuned.